So a lot of people have been writing me and asking me why I haven't said anything about Dinesh D'Souza's new film, 2000 Mules, which is about whether or not the last presidential election was stolen and how it was, and deals with some very specific videos and information that they have. And the reason was I hadn't seen it, and I had a hard time getting it in online, but I finally worked with their publicity people to get a hold of it and watched it this week. And I have asked Lisa, our producer, to invite Dinesh on. Dinesh is always welcome on the show, and he's having a hard time. He says that on Fox News, I don't want to attack our friends on Fox News, but he says they will not mention the name of the film. They won't mention the name of the film. They'll have people on from True the Vote, who is at the center of the film, Catherine Engelbrecht, and they'll have her on, but they'll tell her she can't mention the name of the film. Dinesh can come on here and mention the name of that film or any other film he wants and say anything that he has on his mind anytime. But I've invited him on specifically for this. But I want to talk about the film because I think it's an important film, an important issue, obviously, and a lot of people are still very exercised about the last election, feel it was stolen. And I've told you my opinion, and I'll discuss it again as we go on. Before I say anything about it, though, I want to talk about just briefly the difference between high criticism and low criticism. I mean, there's a difference, because there's always more to say about what's negative about a film or any piece of work than there is about what's positive. But there's a big difference between high criticism and low, and you can picture it like where you say to a friend, you guys, you and your wife do great. You're so loving with one another, and but I just want to make a suggestion that maybe she'd like to receive flowers every now and again, because you're the kind of guy who never thinks about that. That's high criticism. Low criticism is stop beating your wife, or I'm going to take you outside and kick your head in. Right? That's different. So it's the same thing when you say this is a really good film with a lot of great stuff in it, but here are my comments. Than when you say this film stinks. And this is high criticism. I really thought this film needed to be made. Full disclosure, I knew all about the videos that it was about. I hadn't seen them, but they had been described to me in great detail. I knew they existed. I have met Catherine from True the Vote. She probably doesn't remember, but I met her in Santa Barbara at the Bell's house, one of the big, the Snow's house, one of the big donors out there, and I have a lot of faith in her. I believe she is a straightforward person. She kind of came to prominence after the Obama administration used the IRS to shut down the Tea Party, and True the Vote was to make sure elections stay free and fair. And you remember that because Obama came out and said heads will roll, and then it was like not a scintilla of corruption at the IRS. It was a corrupt and terrible abuse of that that powerful agency's power. So here is what True the Vote did. Very interesting thing is that this is all legal. They paid for information that was legally available of apps on phones that can be tracked, location tracked. And so you could see where people were going by tracking the applications on their phones. And they found phones from certain areas. Obviously, they were limited in their funds, but they found phones from certain areas, including Atlanta, Philadelphia, I think Phoenix was one of them, where people had gone by drop boxes, ballot boxes, again and again and again, which they found suspicious in and of itself. And they then correlated that with movements that showed that these people were going to nonprofit organizations, which I don't think they name them in the film, unless I missed it, but I'm pretty sure they don't name them in the film, but nonprofit organizations that they felt might be involved in political corruption and stuffing ballot boxes. So they've got people who are visiting these boxes again and again and again, and they are correlated with movements of people who have gone to these nonprofits. And they found over 2,000 people who visited the drop boxes a lot. And then, also legal, they got what was public information. They got the security footage from some of these drop boxes. And the footage is hilariously suspicious. If you find corruption hilarious, as I do, I don't know why, but I do, it's pretty funny. It's people coming up in the dead of night, 3 o'clock in the morning, some of them wearing rubber gloves, dropping, more than one ballot into the box. Now, you are allowed, in the states that they were in, you were allowed to drop ballots from your family into a box. So you could show up with 4 or 5. And these are not people coming by with like 1,000 ballots or anything like that. They're coming by with 5 or 6 or more ballots. But they're doing it at the dead of night. Some of them are wearing gloves. One of them takes a picture of himself, which they speculate was so he would be paid by the nonprofit. And they're calling them mules because mules are the guys who are used by drug dealers to carry drugs, you probably know, into the country, to smuggle drugs into the country. They're called mules. So they're smuggling these people in. And there is no question in my mind that some of these videos, the videos that they show, and they only show maybe 4 or 5 different people doing this. But there's no question that these are videos of Democrats being Democrats, namely lying, cheated, and pieces of garbage. I mean, the Democrats have been, because they are urban politicians, they have been very, very good at building urban machines that the GOP traditionally doesn't have. As I always say, it's not that we're better people intrinsically, we're all fallen creatures, but when you talk about the big political machines, you're talking about Chicago, you're talking about Boss Tweed, you're talking about the Democrats. They have been stuffing ballot boxes. Lyndon Johnson was a past master at it. He used to walk through cemeteries taking down people's names so he could get them to vote. And that there's no question that they are doing that they are basically getting videos of people who are doing that. They then go on to say in the film, in 2000 Mules, that they believe that what they got, if you extrapolate from just the number of people they found, these 2,000 mules, that if you extrapolate the number of votes times they visited these boxes and use that as the number of votes they may have put in each time they went to the box, that Trump would have won the election. Now, the strongest argument for the film, I mean, the film is really entertaining and the videos are worth seeing, and just talking to it, and Dinesh is in it with a lot of people I know and love, including Gorka and, just all the people from Salem, Eric Metaxas and Dennis Prager, all wonderful people who discuss these things. And the strongest arguments for the film are the bogus fact checks that have come out against it. The AP and the Washington Post put out these fact checks where they said, you can't track phones that closely. And yes, you can. That's just a lie. That is not true. And what's funny about it is these are the same techniques that the feds used to torment and arrest the January 6 protesters. They had obviously been looking at people's phone movements. They found the people who they thought were going to be dangerous at the January 6 protests. Then they went and found out where they were, and they went and arrested them because they knew they had been in the protest. So it's just ridiculous. They're using the same techniques that were used on January 6, and if they're good enough for them, it's good enough for this. The lies of the left are the most powerful thing the right has, because they open the film with people saying this is the most secure election ever. And we know it was nothing like even close to the most secure election ever. I blame partially the Trump administration for letting this happen. The Democrats used COVID to extend the possibility of votes, to increase the possibility of fraud. The New York Times, right up until the day that Trump protested it, said that there's more chance of fraud with mail-in votes. And then suddenly they said, no, mail-in votes are the most secure things either. It was a rigged election in the sense of destroying, of suppressing Hunter Biden's laptop story, in the sense of telling lies about Trump's Russian collusion and organized, conspiracy of lies and all that. But was it a stolen election? That is the question. I have to say, in my opinion, the weakest part of the film is that argument. And in a lot of ways, I think Dinesh might have thought not to do it, because when he calculates that you can extrapolate from these 2,000 people to Trump winning the election, it's flimsy. It's flimsy mathematically. For one thing, I've had Henry Olsen on, and people get angry at Henry because he doesn't believe the election was stolen. But Henry is the best numbers guy I know. He really is. I mean, he is. He's not the best numbers guy. He's one of the best numbers guys. He's up there with anybody, but he is the best numbers guy when it comes to watching polls. And he writes his column for the Washington Post. And Henry Olsen points out that if Democrats stuffed the ballot boxes in large urban areas in 2020, there would be an unexplained increase in turnout in those areas. And the same would be true for areas with higher rates of mail voting if the new practice gave rise to voter fraud. If Trump's fraud theories were true, that share would have increased at a greater rate in counties where the ballot boxes were allegedly stuffed, or in those with the largest share of mailed ballots. But that's not what happened. That is not what happened. The turnout in Philadelphia and other major areas was pretty much what you would expect. Trump won Pennsylvania by a hair when he won it, and he lost it by a hair when he lost it. And the votes that he lost were mostly in suburban white areas. I mean, that is where he got hit. And so the numbers do not hold up. Now, I have said the same thing forever, which is that if you want to overturn an election, you have to do it in a court of law. And by the way, this is not on Dinesh. Dinesh is not trying to make a case worthy to go into a court of law. He's trying to make a documentary and put his case forward. And he puts his case forward, but this was, I thought, the weakest part were the numbers. And I do think we have to remember I have an open mind, and I will be convinced when I'm convinced, but I'm not convinced that the election was stolen. And if you've been convinced by each stage where they said, oh, we're going to unleash the Kraken and we're going to get the Dominion machines and this and that, and if each time you thought, yes, this time it's going to be, we're going to find out this and they're going to reverse the election, and then you found out that each time those things were untrue and yet you still are buying into the next thing, you really should question whether you are wish casting, whether this is wishful thinking. The film is entertaining. The film is worthwhile. The information is important. I don't believe they proved the case that the election was stolen. I simply do not. And again, Dinesh can come on here anytime and argue with me. I love to see him. He's a great guy, and I'm happy to hear his refutation of that. But in terms of pure politics, I think the question we have to ask ourselves, is this a winning issue? And I do not believe it was. That nice Andrew Klavan, if you remember him, he told you that we were going to lose Georgia. We were going to lose the majority in the Senate because Trump would not let this go because his butthurt and his narcissism, and look, you can't say that he is not an egotistical guy, was so great that he would not let this go even when it was time to move on. In politics, it's the future that matters. I understand people being angry. I think it's important for history that we find out the truth. I think it's important for justice that we find out the truth. But if you think this is the political issue that is going to shift the elections in our direction, you are absolutely wrong. It is not. There is no way they are ever going to prove this in court. Jenna Ellis was very honest about this. Once it's done, it's done. There's no way they're going to prove it in court. And so I just think we should, chill. It's fine to get the information. I'm glad they made the documentary. I think the censorship of these things is making it all much, much more plausible. The fact that all of the media is censoring it makes it much more plausible. Even the Wall Street Journal always refers to Trump's false claims. I do not think it's been proven that they're false, but I don't think it's been proven that they're true. Watch the film. It's really worthwhile. Pay attention to where things go right and where they go wrong, and hold it to account. But it's a really entertaining film, and True the Vote is an excellent organization. And again, Dinesh is welcome to come on and refute it. So I would say good film, interesting information, doesn't prove its case that the election was stolen. If you are reeling with delight from the great content here, of course you are. Like and subscribe to the Andrew Klavan Podcast.